Welcome. Thank you for joining our CRM Best Practice Series webinar. I'm Becky Melody, your hostess for today's presentation. Larry Isaacson, CRM Practice Director, will be presenting. The discussion today will cover introductions, webinar logistics, and our discussion topic, regulatory implications of cloud-based CRM for medical device field service systems. The USDM team is proud to have Larry in a leadership role. He offers over 20 years in the application of GxP-compliant IT technology in life science organizations. Larry has experience in manufacturing, software development, and clinical and laboratory contract service management environments. He recently led the implementation and validation of FDA-regulated global ERP laboratory and quality management systems. He has experience in establishing IT and quality, strategy, project, and change management programs. Larry has held the position of Director of IT in pharma, biotech, and medical device companies, and he holds an MS in Pharmaceutical Research Sciences. U.S. data management is focused exclusively on the life science domain. We're the market leader in providing quality and regulatory IT compliance professional service solutions. We're headquartered in Ventura, California, and we've delivered more than 1,000 successful projects with over 200 life science clients. We offer hands-on experience assisting clients under regulatory distress, and we're the market leader for assisting with validation accelerator packs. Our various dedicated practices include IT and virtualization, quality and auditing, ECM, ERP, PLM, EQM, manufacturing automation and equipment, clinical and drug safety, business intelligence, project management, GRC, and our laboratory practice, which includes both systems and equipment. In addition, we have subject matter experts on board to support compliance in the nutraceutical industry. The content will be covered in approximately 30 minutes, and then we'll invite you to post questions for our team via the iLink message board on the lower left of your screen. You can also join us for discussion on LinkedIn and post any questions you have there, or feel free to reach out to us directly by shooting an email to USDM@USDM.com. Now I'll turn the presentation over to Larry.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks for joining us. The agenda today is going to cover a very hot topic that we're finding is exploding in the compliance world and the IT world. And that's basically the application of CRM systems to field services applications. This is something that's evolved recently as CRM has come through its maturity model and has gained the capabilities to be extended out to all sorts of application development areas, and in fact has become an application development platform in many respects. So what we're going to do is cover what has led to the evolution of CRM to this point in terms of being able to be applied to field services, why these compliance requirements apply to field service systems. The industry is suddenly waking up to this as part of this evolution. What risk implications do you encounter when you move to a cloud-based version of these systems, which is happening almost as a sea change across all the application domains. And then how you can best address these cloud-based CRM regulatory risks. And that applies not just to CRM, but to any application you're moving to the cloud. And we'll also discuss briefly a product that we have that helps mitigate risks associated with cloud computing platforms in a major cloud solution. So as most people are already aware, CRM systems have evolved originally from very simple Salesforce automation tools. And these tools were often a heavy client when they first started and often didn't share databases. And they evolved very rapidly to shared solutions and then became integrated into ERP systems as they became more useful. And often they had separate databases from the ERP system. They were commonly tacked on as ERP companies bought these solutions from independent software vendors and then gradually integrated them. So this was a long climb to see CRM systems truly be integrated with ERPs within the ERP suites. They covered the traditional customer databases, tracked the field sales activity against budgets and against targets, and were mostly oriented towards financials in their early days. Later on, as the field sales force got more responsibility, they were able to, through the integration with ERP, start informing customers of the status of their orders, using it for product presentation tools that were highly interactive and updated by real-time data links. The CRM systems were integrated to the phone systems and call centers, and it became a much more holistic approach to overall customer case management. And then for the life sciences, there's been a heavy emphasis for quite a while on product utilization, so that detail representatives can target heavy prescribers or non-prescribers and target their efforts in terms of marketing. So overall, as the CRM expanded to be a more mainstream application through its integration with ERP, there were substantial implications in other areas associated with that. So more recently, the social networking phenomenon has been a major part of CRM evolution, which brings its own risks in terms of the use of chat and other types of more informal communication, and depending upon how they're applied. In fact, it's evolved to the point where CRMs are being used to actually enter orders in the field or call centers for customers. Of course, it's being used to manage sample inventory for detail representatives who are out there distributing samples to physicians or leaving loaners or demo units, because these all have to be tracked. As customer complaints are now coming into call centers and be handled through the CRM system, when in the past they used to come through a different track. This call centers are taking on many more roles than in the past when they used to be segregated. You can see a consolidation there. Product delivery and uptake tracking is also a major component of CRMs these days, because in certain cases handheld devices are being used to track medical device utilization and surgical suites for highly specialized types of devices. And this has now evolved most recently to a full-fledged medical device field services support application. The prevalence of the availability of handheld devices and networks has allowed real-time support for field technicians who are working in the field to have real-time data and the transactions being executed, as opposed to the dedicated standalone handhelds that used to be more prevalent, if not paper. So what happens is that we have substantial FDA compliance considerations that come along with these new roles. GMP, PDMA, and even SOX, since there are substantial financial considerations that go along with the transactions that are flowing to and from CRM systems. With the medical device field support, the CRM takes on a standalone regulatory activity as opposed to being a bridge into other previously validated systems like ERP or a PLM. The problem is that few legacy CRM systems have been built or managed to meet these FDA compliance standards. They were originally out there for strictly sales support. Validation was not a concern. And so now suddenly they're seeing heaped upon them many regulated business processes that come with them, compliance requirements in terms of validation, and we'll touch on those. So we find it useful to look at this overall impact through the process, business process lens, which helps explain why some of these implications are so substantial. If you break down your enterprise into a research and development track where you've got a therapeutic target, whether that be an assay or an instrument or a pharmaceutical agent that you're going after, goes through its life cycle of development, and then it becomes a submission for marketing approval from the FDA. That's got R&D systems supporting it and has its own unique class of systems and regulatory concerns that have to be managed. But once that submission is approved, without an effective sales cycle, that product isn't going to go anywhere. So immediately the CRM is brought into the picture, turning prospects through your unique sales cycle into customers. Once they're customers, you've got orders flowing through the order fulfillment track and developing cash out of that process, hopefully. And, of course, you've got your PLM and your ERP and materials management systems, your traditional ERP-type systems that have been supporting that for a long time. In parallel with that, you've got your quality and compliance for a life sciences organization. So tightly coupled to the order processing and manufacturing are CAPA and changes tracking that's going on through the quality management system to keep these processes in sync. This would really be a dotted line here because there's a very interactive process between the quality management and the actual ERP applications. And then, of course, underlying all of that are your business requirements being transformed into solutions by your IT and associated finance and HR and SDLC processes that are applied. So this has been the traditional model that people have dealt with in the past, with CRM being relegated to a sales support mechanism. And now that's evolved so that now not only is it supporting the sales organization heavily, but it's also dealing more comprehensively in call centers with issues that come from the customer and get turned into resolutions of some kind through a customer support channel. And so the CRM is now in two major paths of critical business process, very tightly coupled more and more to the ERP system. And then along with that, quality management considerations, because the CRM is now in the mainstream of order fulfillment and traceability of product, et cetera. When you add the field service unique applications domain, now you've got your ERP covering not just your sales and not just order processing and not just customer support, but actual execution of maintenance calls and resulting in repairs and returns in many cases of product. So now you've introduced a substantial inventory management process that occurs in the field. CRM is actually taking on, in terms of field service, an ERP process for after-the-fact deployment of product in the field. So it involves, from a compliance standpoint, all of the critical factors that an ERP system has traditionally handled is basically bound up in field service management when you're using it comprehensively. And along with that comes your quality management considerations, some of which are quite unique for field service. And more recently, you've got your cloud platforms coming into the mix. So now you have additional quality concerns related to use of cloud platforms, which are very, very suitable for this type of virtual field support activity. So that leads to the question, well, why is it that field services brings with it these regulatory requirements? This is something that we've seen on a large scale level, just the light bulbs going off in the industry as to the fact that they've now stepped into a new domain of regulatory compliance. So what I'm going to do here is just cite a few of the areas that bring these requirements along in field service systems. One is your service history data collection. And one of the main benefits of having such a system is that you're building that electronic history data, and that can be used very powerfully to augment customer service. And all that history is kept in one place. Any of your support people can access it. So that's a very powerful capability to have virtually, globally. And so the regulatory requirement associated with is that the manufacturer must analyze service reports and report any events that meet a certain threshold that may indicate a threat to the product quality or the patients that may be involved with, depending upon the device involved. And that's stated in the quality system regulations, Part 820, Subpart N, under the servicing category. In terms of medical device installation and part verification tracking, it's specified that the manufacturer must maintain distribution records and document proper installations, and that's specified in Subpart L under distribution and installation. So it's very, it's not ambiguous in terms of where these requirements are coming from. The actual medical device or part installation verification here is delineated in terms of regulatory requirements for its Class 2 or Class 3 products in Part 821 for tracking requirements, where it's explicitly stated that these things have to be tracked throughout their life cycle. You start talking about medical device complaints, failure reports, replacement and return transactions. It's which are all these functions are embedded within a good field service system. You're basically under the requirement that and the reason you're doing this is because you must document complaints, devices involved, and corrective actions taken. And that's under the management of complaint files in Part 820. And by the same token, for service history data collection and parts replacements, you're also satisfying the requirement where the manufacturer must maintain records and evaluate supplier performance. So building up a database and a service history and a parts replacement history in such a system gives you a very good insight into the quality of your suppliers and where you may have to go back and mitigate manufacturing or other issues that a supplier who is providing you critical parts may be causing in the field. So this capability satisfies this purchasing section here in terms of how the requirements. So there's no question that this application brings with it a substantial number of very explicit regulatory requirements and is accumulating records that are going to be very critical to demonstrate compliance in these areas and other areas too, R&D. So sometimes we get the discussion that, well, really the CRM is not the system of record here, it's just feeding data into other systems that are really our system of record. And perhaps, these regulatory requirements don't really apply very well. Well, that's a nice thought, but that doesn't really hold water because the CRM system is becoming your conduit, your gateway for that information to flow across to these systems of record, your traditional systems of record. And in fact, when you look more deeply, the CRM is becoming a system of record as well, because it's not just transferring this data, but it's storing it in its own databases. It has master data files that are being updated in order for it to do its work. So it in fact is becoming a system of record. So these traditional system of records have been the ERP system, separate customer complaints system that you might have in, let's say, an Agile system, workflow, or dedicated adverse event systems. If you're running a call center where you're supporting clinical trials, you may get a lot of calls from patients, and you then have to determine which ones are adverse events. Often these are being logged now into CRM systems as opposed to directly into adverse event systems. So now, as the CRM system is becoming an extension of validated GXP systems, legacy systems, the CRM system inherits the compliance requirements of the controlled process being supported. And that's why we look at that process view. The process really tells you how the flow of compliance responsibility and accountability is being shifted across systems, because that chain of evidence, if you will, of the system of the data has to be maintained. So the reason we validate the portions of CRM systems that are taking on these roles is to assure and demonstrate that the regulated data travels a path of high integrity to the ultimate storage destination. And this brings into the question of the integrations and interfaces that are being put in place, because even within a suite of a major ERP system that has a CRM component, there are often separate integrations that are actually facilitating that movement of data from the CRM into the traditional ERP systems and back again. So these interfaces, whether they be packaged or customized, have a unique set of requirements associated with demonstrating that they are properly moving the information from one system to the other, and you can be dependent upon them, not only in terms of are they doing it right the first time, but if there's a failure, can they be recovered to a known state. So now, when you layer on top of it the compliance requirements of the cloud, things become even more interesting because as the CRM is a regulated system and you're moving into the cloud, it brings in additional considerations of supplier relationships, which we'll touch on shortly. So for those who are not already familiar with this, I'll just do a quick recap of what it means when the CRM systems or the field service system takes on this role in a life science or regulated entity. You've got to have the considerations of a platform qualification. You have to be able to vouch for the hardware and software supporting the application, that it's under control, that it has a certain amount of integrity, and it's not being changed without proper testing. The same with the application. It has to be, you may do a subset of the CRM. You may not have to validate the purely sales side and the financials, but the portions that are taking on regulatory data would have to be validated and demonstrate that they work as expected against a set of requirements. You would then have to have a well-defined change control process for both the platform and application, quality system, documentation showing that this is being administered properly by a quality organization of some kind, and with the appropriate training and document control that goes along with these types of regulations. And that the transactions themselves are auditable, that you can go through and track data from one end to the other and know that it's getting reported at the other end with the same integrity that it came in originally, and that across these interfaces. So the impact that you're going to find that you'll have to face if you haven't validated these systems will depend on the architecture. If you're using a CRM that's already integrated with your ERP, you may have less impact because it may inherit the benefits of the prior validation or qualification at the platform level. It may actually share master data that has already been validated in terms of its source and its management, such as personnel and facilities and product. If it's a new system and standalone from a different vendor, you would have a greater impact in terms of the amount of qualification you might have to do in validation, because you're starting with an independent system that has to be validated and verified from the ground up. Now, if you're moving into a cloud-based deployment, which is being integrated with your core systems that are on your premises, then the impact is much more substantial, because that system is at arm's length from your other systems. It's not directly under your control, which has enormous benefits in many respects, but also brings along some risks that have to be mitigated. One of the principles we like to emphasize when you're looking at a cloud deployment of any application is to keep in mind that the SaaS or third-party hosting platform provider cannot be at any lower level of compliance than that you would provide for your internally hosted applications. So you can't think that, well, I'm going to offload all this stuff to a third-party vendor, either a hosting vendor or the application vendor themselves, and think, well, now that's their responsibility. There's a very well-defined framework for managing suppliers to regulated organizations, and you still have accountability for their operations, just as you would have the accountability for your own operations. It becomes a little more difficult because it's not under your direct scrutiny and control, and we'll discuss how you can overcome some of those issues. We like to look at this a little bit graphically, which helps highlight why this risk is pretty significant when you're moving into the cloud. If you look at the hosting model for your base case where you've been hosting your own CRM system or any other validated application, but in this case we're talking about CRM for field service, if you had your own internal system supporting a business process which is here internal to your organization or globally across the organization. And then you've got your own internal platform of application and infrastructure. And you've got an IT organization that you control that's basically, obviously using contract resources at times, but is something that's under your organization. You have the benefits of a shared quality management system, a common quality management system over both these domains through your QA group. And you've also got, presumably, shared IT SLAs that have been agreed across these domains in terms of the availability and control and change management, et cetera, that's going to go on within that system. And it's under your scrutiny, so you have it makes compliance much easier to demonstrate. Once you move into a SaaS-based CRM or any other validated application, you've now introduced the supplier relationship. So your business process is still over here depending upon CRM, and you've got your internal IT organization, and you've got your quality management system here within this box. And now there's a vendor with their own quality management system, presumably, with their self-owned applications and infrastructure, which you're licensing as a subscriber. And they've got their own vendor IT organization. So that creates an IT SLA gap in terms of the support and operations of the IT group and the facilities that are being utilized to support the application. And then a GMP compliance gap where you've got two QA groups involved, yours and the vendors. And there has to be some harmonization here of quality functions that are necessary for you to be able to demonstrate to authorities that this vendor is supporting your application in a compliant manner. So this question mark here is meant to say this gap has to be bridged in some way. And we'll talk about some of the ways that can be done. Now, on top of that, when you take into the fact that inherently you're going to have an integration challenge here for this, this integration challenge exists even if it's on premises. So you've got this gap here between, if this is your internal legacy GXP application, let's say ERP, and this is your CRM system, even if this is all within your premises, you've got this gap that has to be bridged between the CRM API or links, whatever it is, XMLs, however they're using it, shared databases, and the APIs or connections that your internal applications are using, depending on their architecture, their age, etc. This question mark is, how do I integrate these two systems here so that I can demonstrate the data is flowing seamlessly, especially if it's being transformed from one to the other and back again to the extent that's bidirectional. So you've got your SLA back when you're dealing with a supplier, and you've got your GMP compliance gap, but you've also got an integration gap here that needs to be bridged from a technical standpoint, and you need to be able to demonstrate through your validation and qualification of this interface, through the transaction logs, presumably that are internal to your legacy applications, and the transaction logs in the CRM, combined with some transaction information of what's coming across this database to show that this has integrity across this domain. So integration is part and parcel of this challenge, and there are very specific ways you need to be able to address this to demonstrate not just that this guy is in good shape and this guy is in good shape, but all this is happening appropriately and the data is not getting converted in the wrong way or dropped. And if there's a failure, if the recovery process maintains the integrity of the data on both sides of this. So there's plenty of things to think about. It's just made a little harder when you have to negotiate with a third party that owns the application and the infrastructure as to what's going on here. So there are some well-defined ways you can address this up front that we recommend and that we can help you with. Number one is that we recommend you perform on-site vendor audits for SaaS vendors, covering the key, not just your business requirements, of course, but the key GAMP5 Part 11 requirements for platform and application management as early as you can in the contracting process. We highly recommend, based on sad experiences we've seen, but you don't take the vendor's word for it that they've already done this for other pharmaceutical clients. We've seen great unevenness with which in the scrutiny with which various pharmaceutical medical device companies have moved into this area and later had some nasty surprises. So I would say you've got to do this yourself and get eyes on the operation to be sure that this is being handled. To back that up, we would certainly want a service level agreement with the SaaS supplier, which is pretty much standard, but I would make that as detailed as possible and as explicit as possible. And I would also combine that with an explicit quality agreement with the supplier. Just as is done very commonly if you contract out manufacturing for critically regulated products or components or packaging material, to ensure that they are meeting their compliance requirements in a suitable way. This is something that you should also consider for SaaS suppliers for IT purposes, because they are, strictly speaking, supporting your business process directly, and you need to know that you can depend on their understanding of the quality requirements in this area. You should pay attention to multi-tenant platform interfaces and security considerations, confidentiality, etc., and to make sure that there's some level of qualification, some testing that's been done to demonstrate that these are under control, along with clear, change control and all the rest of it that we talked about. You have to make sure that you have right to your information. If that vendor disappears or something else happens you want to change, you've got to be able to get your data back. You've also got to have access in case of regulatory audits or other actions to have a right to be able to go in and audit that vendor, or to have regulatory authorities do that if that's ever necessary. You would want to make sure that the qualified system and data recovery process is in place. There's a disaster, if you're contracting for disaster recovery services from that vendor, make sure that those are tested and qualified at the other site. So keep in mind that if you fail over to a disaster recovery site and you use it for production, that site can be at no less a level of compliance than the primary site for you to be able to feel comfortable that you can operate at that location. That's often an area people overlook. You've heard this before from us. Don't accept the stock SAS 70/ISO/ many other certifications as equivalent to Part 11. I think by now people are pretty much aware that there's a different standard applied to Part 11 verification, and that SAS 70 and ISO is a great foundation, but it usually doesn't by itself meet the documentation requirements that we need for FDA compliance. And we certainly recommend, if you're new at this, to partner with an IT compliance firm specializing in cloud systems such as USDM, because they can save a lot of headaches along the way and smooth the path from the get-go. One of the ways USDM does that is that we've partnered with a major cloud provider, Salesforce.com, to develop a pre-executed qualification package for the Force.com data center management and software development process. So what this provides is documented evidence, executed scripts that show that the Force.com platform is managed at a level that supports Part 11 requirements as a cloud-based architecture. And this basically underlies your validation of your actual application that may be sitting on the Force.com platform. It's signed off by Salesforce and USDM to assure best practices represented in the documents, and it's verified and acknowledged by the system owner, which is Salesforce.com. Also available are the yearly updates as annual supplier audits are being executed, as is required by FDA regulations for a critical supplier. And we consider these a very critical supplier in terms of risk, because there is no barrier, there is no gateway between your accepting the output of the SaaS vendor and your utilization of it. Your business process is sitting right on that system. If they mess something up, if they are not operating in a compliant manner, you don't have an opportunity to accept or reject the result of their operation. It'll already have impacted your process before you can do anything about it. So that's why we look at these as high-risk scenarios that need to be well controlled and documented. We also have VAPs, Validation Accelerator Packs, that basically allow you for certain select third-party ISVs, independent software vendors for field service applications, most recently ServiceMax we're working with, to rapidly revalidate the system as Salesforce.com is frequently updated. I think they do quarterly updates. So it's really valuable if you can automate the process of testing so that you don't have to spend a lot of time revalidating critical areas. These can be scaled based on the assessment of the changes that have been put in place. So in summary, CRM is evolving, as we've said, not just as a gateway to other ERP and other regulated systems, but also now with field service being layered onto it, is taking on regulated processes inherently and needs to be treated as a regulated app. You have to keep in mind that any portion of a CRM system that is doing validated type of process work means that the IT platform under it has to be a qualified platform. It's not just a little bit pregnant here. If you're using that platform for these purposes, the entire platform has to be under control. And for cloud-based deployments, there's a lot of special considerations and activities that need to be taken on to overcome the compliance and gap there. And then we certainly recommend that you partner with USDM to help you meet these challenges in a very cost-effective manner. And by the way, if you'd like more information on this, we're going to be at the Field Service Medical Conference in San Diego next week, so we hope you'll stop by and say hello. So with that, I'll turn it over to Becky for questions. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Larry. We sure appreciate that. Great information there. Having some interesting chats and good feedback here. We will open the floor to questions now. And while you're typing in your questions, I'd like to let you know that the webinar has been recorded and will be available on our website, usdm.co. Take a look there. Feel free to browse the website and look at the various practice areas as well as upcoming webinar events and previously recorded sessions that might be useful for you as you're tackling all sorts of areas within our regulated realm. Okay, looks like our first question coming in is from Brian. What are the biggest problems encountered when migrating to a cloud-based field service application?
That's a really good question. I mean, we've certainly covered some of the major ones. One of the ones that we didn't necessarily cover that, in fact, we're helping a client with right now is the data migration consideration. Normally, you've obviously been handling these processes some way, maybe with smaller standalone systems or as part of an on-premises suite, and you're pulling it away from perhaps other systems and changing that integration model and moving that information to a cloud. It may be the same vendor that you've had on premises, or it may be a different vendor. The issues normally have to do with data migration. So how do you move this information into another system with perhaps a very different data model? And just like integrations where you're moving that data back and forth, these often involve transformations and a lot of forward thinking as to how you're going to verify from a validation and compliance standpoint that that data was reloaded into the new system appropriately. All of your stock information in terms of your parts and your products and your inventory and your customers, all the things that support traceability and all these inventory of transactions and the technician information and all the rest of it in terms of skills are crucial to the operation of the system. So to the extent that you're initially populating a system, if it's new to you, or to the extent that you're migrating data, this is a very challenging area and has to be thought of both in terms of the technical considerations and the transformations involved from a business standpoint, as well as the compliance. How am I going to verify that this data is actually transferred successfully? And data migration scripts and verification scripts are something USDM supplies pretty routinely for clients to be able to demonstrate that.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, our next question is from Joe. what should I ask my quality assurance department to do to help with the compliance side of cloud applications?
That's often an area that's overlooked. Unfortunately, we come in to situations here where quality groups were never involved, and even if they were involved, they often haven't had a lot of insight into what the cloud-based migration means. In many cases, we've seen IT organizations, based on their technical knowledge, say, well, really, it's no different than we have it on premises. It's just a virtual environment, and the application doesn't know any difference. You're using a network to get to it, so what's the big deal? It shouldn't really require any additional validation or consideration. And so they can move forward with the business based on that without quality being involved, and later finding out when they come to try to go live that there's a lot of things that weren't considered as part of the compliance side. It's very important in our view to get quality involved early, to give them a heads up that these architectural changes are occurring to an existing validated system or to a system that's integrated with a validated system. If there's data flowing from that CRM to other legacy validated systems, it has an impact from a quality perspective. And you may often discover, as we see, that people have been ignoring critical compliance requirements that have existed in their CRM for a period of time, but we're under the radar. So I highly recommend that you bring them in early and ask them for their assessment. Have a good layman's description of exactly what's happening in the system and what its impact is. And this should all go through change control. So if it goes through change control, usually it'll have visibility.
Thank you, Larry. Our next question is from Anise, and she says, in CRM, there are multiple modules, so when it comes to validating the system, would we be validating all the modules, or are there specific modules that would need to follow compliance?
Well, as usual, we would say it depends, and what it usually depends on is which of those modules is being used for regulated purposes. So what you do is basically, as part of your assessment, you say it's sort of a bottom-up and top-down perspective. This is where your quality group can help quite a bit. If the data that's being handled by that CRM is data that is touching the product itself, the status of the product, that's either its development or its control in the field or its control through the supply chain, or its potential status of complaints or issues in the field, or once sent out and deployed, then it's likely that would have a regulatory component. So, depending upon which, and there's some other wrinkles there to consider as well. Even though, let's say, account management is not explicitly by itself, the handling of customer definitions inside a CRM may not be explicitly a regulated activity, it is supportive of regulated processes in the application. So to some degree, there's a certain level of verification that has to be shown that the portion that handles the customer data is operating properly. So it may be as simple as demonstrating that if you can add a customer, you can delete a customer, you can edit a customer, and that you have security associated with those processes to know the customer data is intact. So if you think about traceability, which is often at the root of most of this, anything that's supportive of you being able to figure out where did my product go, who's using it, how long has it been there, what's its service history, are there big complaints associated with it, any of the supporting information needed to ascertain that would be considered, have to be controlled.
All right, thank you, Larry. Okay, our next question from Joe. Has there been any progress in cooperative audits between organizations so that if cloud-based SaaS provider has been audited, that it may eliminate the need to re-audit them?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I have heard of that in other industries where there's been centrally developed audits. Actually, in the pharmaceutical industry, I do understand that there are organizations that have sponsored audits collectively that can be used across the industry. But that has not evolved so far in the cloud environment for regulated systems. This is still a very early days kind of scenario, even when you're dealing with hosting, and not just with the SaaS process, but just going out to outsource your hosting of regulated applications. There's a lot of inconsistencies in how well that's being done, even among vendors who claim they understand Part 11. So from a risk mitigation standpoint, there's nothing like taking that on yourself and going and doing that audit yourself with the inclusion of your quality group and knowledgeable IT people to basically benchmark these vendors against your own internal processes. So presumably you have well-defined processes internally that are meeting a certain standard. You don't want the vendor to be at any less of a standard, and you would hope maybe even a little better.
All right. Okay, follow-on question from Anis. Does all CRM server would have a back-end server to support its function to the user, i.e. server like ECC, or can it be done using CRM server?
Well, there are a wide variety of foundational infrastructures available that can support CRM. If you're looking at, obviously, on-premises, depending on whether you're customizing the package or whether you're buying a vendor solution, all of those can be applicable. There's an infinite number of infrastructure possibilities as to how you go about doing this. We have seen also, just FYI, add-on packages for CRM systems that provide Part 11 compliant capabilities in terms of audit trail and electronic signature that you can choose from, even bolting it onto an existing vendor-provided application that exists in the cloud. And with Force.com, there we know of several of those that we've partnered. So the real issue is characterizing whichever one that you're going to be using, whether you own it or whether it's in the cloud. You have to have some understanding of what that looks like and to be able to demonstrate that it's under control. So in the case of our validateforce platform qualification, we've demonstrated that this environment that is being used by Force.com is maintained under a controlled state and has the appropriate framework to maintain that, despite whatever hardware, software combinations they're using. And there can be a multitude of those. The main thing is to demonstrate that the controls are in place and the configuration management is in place, and that you can characterize its state at any given time.
Thank you, Larry. Well said. Our next question is from Susan. Should I avoid cloud-based field service applications and stay with on-premises systems?
Well, that's an interesting consideration. It certainly does simplify your life doing that. However, you then would forego some of the enormous benefits of using cloud-based systems in terms of the lack of capital investment necessary up front, the ability to scale your utilization as your organization grows and takes on new functionality, and the amazing global capability in terms of accessibility that you get with these well-managed cloud providers. So it's difficult to say. Obviously, it depends on your business situation. If you look at the security considerations for cloud and you determine that, well, if you're the Department of Defense, perhaps you wouldn't want to have a public cloud being your hosting foundation for certain functions. But at the same time, for even normal industry confidentiality concerns, there are ways to mitigate any security concerns in the cloud if you do your homework and you put in the proper, standardized types of encryption, et cetera. Even in a multi-tenant environment where this can be, pretty much guaranteed in terms of the security. But you have to have done your homework, looked at the standards, ensured that they're in place and that there's proper ongoing control. As we always like to say in validation, when you actually do your testing and your verification, you've taken a snapshot in time. What's really important is anyone can sort of reach the mountaintop once, but can you stay up there? And so the real test of compliance is being able to stay on top of the mountain and maintain that level of vigilance and control that you established in your initial validation verification. And that's what USDM strives to help clients with.
Great. Okay, looks like we have time for one more question here. And it's from John. He says, if I already have deployed these systems without validation, what should be my first step? I think you mean besides calling US data management, I think. Yeah.
Besides that, that'll certainly save you a lot of time. But the first thing, once you've realized this, and we've helped many clients in this situation, is that you would want to do an assessment. Now, usually, unfortunately, many people come to this realization as a result of a negative audit finding, whether that be by a regulatory agency or by their own internal auditors or quality group that discovers that these things have been deployed, where you've got to do something fairly quickly. So the first thing is to do a risk assessment, determine what's out there, how far have you gone with this, what business processes and data are put at risk by operating in a non-validated system, and what's it connected to. What other systems could be at risk, because by definition, if you've got a validated, let's say, ERP system, and you suddenly start bringing data in without the proper mitigation from a non-validated system that you didn't really think about, then perhaps you've put your ERP system at risk if there wasn't sufficient edit checking or verification, included with that interface. So once you've ascertained what the risk level is for that data, then you can take steps to prioritize those risks and attack them one at a time. Get your quality group involved as soon as possible if they aren't already, and put a plan together to close the gap. And usually, doing that assessment and then putting a plan together and then starting to execute on it will be sufficient evidence to show that you're taking that requirement seriously. And as long as you put a boundary on how long it's going to take you to address it, a regulatory agency is going to look at that as positive, as opposed to something you just didn't even bother to think about or worry about, and were perhaps ignorant of, which is even worse from their perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you, Larry, and very good. And thank you to those of you that are typing compliments and kudos there. We are excited to be presenting such a leading-edge topic and to be able to offer direction to pain points and hopefully solutions. Would like you to know that our next scheduled webinar is sponsored by the USDM Project Management Practice. It's titled Taking the Risk Out of Data and Document Migration, and that's going to be on February 21st at 11 o'clock Pacific time. Hope that you can join us if it's of interest to you and your team. We would invite you to join the discussion forum on LinkedIn. We are excited about and welcome your insight, your feedback, and even suggestions for future topics. If you let us know what you're struggling with, then we can hopefully present some information that might, again, address, and offer solutions for you. If you appreciated the webinar today, please let us know by clicking the like button on the USDM LinkedIn group page, or even better, post a comment out there. Takes just a moment and lets us know if we're on the right track, which we appreciate. Larry, thank you so much for presenting today, and thanks to all of you for taking the time to join us. So we do appreciate the opportunity to team with you in working towards excellence in compliance. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.